Thanks for tuning into this episode of FinTech Focus TV, powered by Harrington Starr, the global leaders in financial technology recruitment. Head over to the Harrington Starr website where you'll be able to find all the latest jobs in financial technology across the globe. You'll also be able to download the latest issue of the Financial Technologist magazine, including the Top 1% Workplace Awards. Finally, if you're looking to grow your team, please get in touch. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby, and today I am absolutely delighted, probably the person who's moved the most miles to come into the studio to come and meet us today, Krishna Nadella from Sigtech. How are you?
Very good, thank you for having me.
Krishna, really good to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much.
Heading back, I think, tomorrow to the US?
Heading back to the US on Thursday, but almost
okay,
there.
A little bit. So we've you had a good week over last week. We've been talking beforehand off camera about some of the people you've been talking to. Sounds like a really, really exciting time for you in the business. We're going to get into a little bit of that, but also look at your journey, which I think is really interesting, and explore loads of that as well. So, loads to get into today. Before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself and Sigtech as well.
Sure, absolutely. Well, let's start with myself. Krishna Nadella. I am a veteran of financial services and financial technology for the better part of 2 decades. Started off my career on the sell side at Citigroup, working in their Global Structured Credit Products division, which is a fancy way of saying I sold CDOs and CLOs that were backed by subprime loans, which led up to the 2008 financial crisis. So yes, I am a victim, but also a survivor of the 2008 financial crisis. From there, I spent the 2010s at Bloomberg, building out their data business, which went from a fledgling pass-through business of around $50 million to what is now, I think, about a $2 billion business.
Isn't it?
It really was the rise of big data. So sometimes it's better to be at the right place at the right time. And so a great tenure run, both great firms, great cultures. And then I had the fortunate opportunity to join Symphony Communications. I had never worked at a startup before, and having the opportunity to work for the CEO, Brad Levy, for 3 years, I got to wear so many hats, but boy, did he throw me into the deep end without a life jacket. So it was one of those sink or swim situations, but learned so much about regulatory affairs, corporate development, market strategy, and even partnerships.
Which is business is always doing so many things.
100%.
Isn't it?
And so taking all of that, really learning how to think on a macro level, and then be able to have that tutelage at the same time. 3-year stint, Brad and I always talked about being a 3-year stint, and just about 4 months ago, I joined Sigtech to head up the Americas.
And Sigtech's a company that, as I said before, has fascinated me for a while. So tell me a little bit about the Sigtech story too.
Sure, absolutely. So Sigtech is actually a spin-out of Brevin Howard.
Yeah.
Our CEO, Bin Ren, was the former CIO of the Systematic Investment Group at Brevin, Sig Tech.
There you go.
There it is.
Something it'll drop. Something that but his background is extraordinary.
Oh my God, he is just a fascinating individual. I think he skipped 2 or 3 grades in China, won 2 math Olympiads, came to London to do his PhD on a full ride, and obviously did very well at Brevin, and eventually started Sigtech, which is a company that focuses on data validation, portfolio construction, research backtesting, and deployment. So basically a one-stop shop for a hedge fund or a buy-side firm to be able to get up and running quickly and be able to go back and do what they do best, which is justify their 2 and 20.
And I think this is a really interesting part of what's happening in the buy-side at the moment. Is it's technology like this that I think is democratizing the space a little bit more, because it used to be the sort of, I guess the domain of the bigger players who just used to have such technological advantage. But it's businesses like these that I think of, I use that word, really carefully, but democratizing the space, I think, is something there which allows people, to compete at a different level. Is that what you're seeing the appetite?
100%. That's so spot on the right word. I mean, I think about my own story. I was born in a village in India. And within a generation, I'm able to look at technology and how it applies to wealth creation, socioeconomic status in terms of being able to have that opportunity. And I think that's what really it's about. It's not about whether or not you're going to make that million or not. Do you have the opportunity to do so? And so having technology, the value that it brings to have those tools accessible to you, that's really the game-changing aspect of all of this, is that we've always known the capabilities there, but some have the tools and some don't. To be able to democratize and allow for everyone to have a chance, that really is our mission.
And I think when you've got some leading bright spots, some great brains, some great thinkers in the space in that business, it sort of becomes a playground for innovation. You were talking to me and showing me some of the things that you've been playing with over the weekend. There is such a space. I talk about sort of this generational opportunity we've got in technology at the moment, and I know we've had various bits and pieces. You talked there about the sort of rise of big data with Bloomberg, in 2010, etc. But I think at the moment, if you look at the sort of storm of technology that's happening all at the same sort of stage, we're at possibly the most exciting phase in financial technology.
I could not be more, as we would say in the US, more stoked than I am right now. It is an exciting time. I think when we all saw the release of OpenAI's ChatGPT, we all kind of knew this is different. This is like the internet back in the 90s. Yeah. This is something that we will talk about pre and post. And I have 3 young children, and I know this is going to be part of their life going forward. So there's so much good, there's so much positivity, but there's responsibility. And you and I were joking, I'm a big comic book fan, and Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, always says, with great power comes great responsibility. It's incumbent on us, the industry, to be responsible, to use this technology wisely, and to be able to share it as well, to be able to say it's not for some and not for others, it's for all. And how can we make that available so everyone has the opportunity to win? Because it's not a zero-sum game. Yeah. Everyone has a chance to have wealth creation. Everyone has a chance to succeed and increase their stature in life. And so how do we get this technology into people's hands, and how do we teach them how to use it properly for the betterment of themselves and the betterment of society?
Absolutely, and that creates a huge flow of opportunities for everyone involved in the space. I want to talk a little bit about your move. So you went there to simply, your career, as you say, spans 2 decades in the space. You've seen progress, you've seen your role sort of evolve a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing at the moment and how this move is sort of formed to take your career to the next level as well.
Absolutely. So coming to Sigtech, one of the things I was brought on to do was to help increase our brand, our exposure in the US. Yeah. As you know, Brevin Howard is a London-based firm, and Sigtech is a spin-out of Brevin. So stronger presence in London, stronger presence in EMEA. But really, when we think about hedge funds, we think about financial services, with all due respect to our friends in London, New York is still the capital. At least I think so. And so we really need to start putting our efforts there. And I was brought in for that specific reason, to increase the brand, increase the sales, increase the opportunity, to allow for Sigtech to really thrive and flourish and get in front of the right people. So for myself, we are very much trying to do a lot of things at the same amount of time. As I always like to joke with my team, we are behind schedule, we are behind track on our development, we are behind on everything, but we have so much we can do in a short amount of time. So let's act like the sort of Democrates is over our heads, and like no moment can be wasted. And that's when you get a company that really starts to push, because if you feel that pressure that you put on yourself, then you're going to see yourself do things you wouldn't otherwise do. So for us, whether it be working with our customers, whether it be working with organizations like yourself, getting our name out there, whether it be working with strategic investors or partners, this is part of that process. And there's never enough time in a day. And so that constant thinking about what else can we be doing, it's really exciting, but it's also really fun. If you have an imagination that is not inhibited, there's no avenue you're not willing to consider or pursue. And that's what I love about being at a startup, is that, like, Albert Einstein said it best, imagination is more important than knowledge. And I can tell you, and I joked about this, when it comes to knowledge, I'm probably the least intelligent within Sigtech. And that's a compliment to all my colleagues. We have some really, really smart people there. And I'm so blessed to be exposed to them, to work with them day after day and learn from them. So going to a place, and I would say this to all people who are looking for their career trajectory, where they want to go to a place where you can learn. Go to a place where you are surrounded by people who are so much smarter than you. And go to a place where you have opportunity to grow and use your imagination and think of ideas. Strategy doesn't belong to a few. Everyone has a strategy. Find a way how you can implement the one you have in your head.
And it's really interesting that, because you can see you're thriving from being in this sort of play, and having been through your CV and your track record so far, you've worked for some incredible businesses and some and I imagine within that some outstanding people alongside it. I love what you said before we came on air about how this, as with businesses at this sort of stage, sometimes there's risk and there's obviously reward around that as well. Talk to me about the thought process in your head about going from some pretty established businesses on the CV so far into something there which is got some more some risk. For one
absolutely. So we probably should start back during my time at Citi, and just to be clear, I was asked to leave. I didn't leave on my own accord. Obviously, the 2008 financial crisis, there was a lot of collateral to that. I was one of them. So for me, I always thought when I got into Citi that I would work there until I retired. Like everyone, I think want to become the CEO
Get
one
the
day.
carriage clock and all that
Exactly.
sort of thing.
Obviously, that ended far too soon, but it was a real test and perseverance for me.
Yeah.
I was raised in Canada, so I was a Canadian citizen. So as far as the United States is concerned, I was on a visa, and so I lost my visa, I lost my job. Obviously, I couldn't go back to an industry that right now was on the downside of a market. I lost my mortgage for an apartment I was trying to purchase.
Wow.
New York may have 7 million people in it, but when you're unemployed and you are trying to get back on your feet, it can feel very lonely.
Well, you can see that straight away, right?
Absolutely. And so it was tough. I'm not going to sit here and try to sugarcoat it. There were days where I really asked myself, where does my journey go from here?
Yeah.
We had never seen anything like it. I mean, watch The Big Short. It really is pretty accurate in terms of how things.
I've spoken to a number of people who were there and sat there watching, and they kind of conceded destiny who was sat opposite them and whatever.
Yeah, but I had to remind myself, don't try to think about when this ends, this time being unemployed. Think about each day on its own. Work on one day at a time. There's a great speech that was made by a member of our armed services in the United States where he said, start your day by making your bed. Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
And so I told myself, okay.
Stanley McChrystal, was it?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
And so I said that to myself. I said, I need to treat each day as if I was going to work, even if the work I'm doing is to find a job.
Yeah.
And so get up, go to the gym, take care of my health, then start looking for a job. Approach it the way I would have approached my job. And I have to remind myself that this will eventually end. And each day that goes by, we're getting closer to the end. It's all the visualization, it's all the manifesting and believing that, look, this is just a bump in the road and my journey has many more years to go. But you have to live in the moment, otherwise it can be quite overwhelming.
Well, this is an interesting space for that, isn't it? Because look, we've been in a very interesting sort of ride since 2008.
That's right.
Your whole career has seen some interesting times throughout this. Throughout this period within financial services, within the economy as a whole, within technology, there's been lots of different curves on that journey.
Yeah.
Mine goes back a little bit further to the dot-com bubble. So that was my first part where we first saw that. 2008 was pretty brutal in my line of work, as you can imagine. And so when 2020 came around and COVID-19 etc. You kind of knew that there was going to be a way through, and you had to push on from that. We saw a real boom in 21, 22, and 23 is characterised by a number of different people who found it more difficult. And I think it gives you a perspective and a sort of I guess some more authority to be able to look through it and understand it, and a calm that you sort of have through there. I know you're managing a team now, and there'll be some great lessons about how you can sort of, go with that and keep people driving further forward, as you were talking about as well. Because I think there's as we launch this, it'll be somewhere towards 2024 that we push this out. Looking to 24, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and there's going to be some exciting things, and we're going to see some real growth again, and we're going to see some people doing some incredible work over the course of the next year or so. Tell me what you're saying to people at the moment. Tell me how people are navigating this. Look, you've got a product which I think is an incredible sell, to be putting in front of people, but it still needs to be bought from people who are, I think probably 2023 has been characterised by people sort of rubbing their chins and saying we like it, but should we be investing, shouldn't we, etc., etc., which is difficult for people who haven't sold in that sort of environment before. So share some of your wisdom, because I know you're a mentor as well. I know you like to give back. I know you like to do that sort of thing. Share some of your wisdom now.
So first and foremost, selling is hard. I just want to make sure that's clearly understood. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it. But
very true.
So in a good market, bad market, trying to get someone to give you their money for something you're trying to sell them, it's the oldest profession in the world. And it's something that we all have in us, but not everyone wants to necessarily do, because it's trying, it's hard. You're putting yourself out there, and rejection's always a possibility. With that said, it's an exciting time. It really is an exciting time, because we have in our midst right now technology that is changing the way we look at workflow, the way we look at how we function, the way we operate. And a lot of that came with last November's launch of OpenAI's ChatGPT.
Yeah.
We're looking at technology that's going to help make our workflow so much smoother. It's going to decrease inefficiencies in the market, and it's going to allow us to learn and grow. I have 3 children, ages 9, 7, and 5. They're going to live in a world where ChatGPT is very much part and parcel of how they
Yeah.
operate, the way the internet was
Yeah.
for a lot of us. And so that's going to make them better.
Well, see, even when as you look at my kids using Google,
Yeah.
and I think back to how we didn't have that in my day to be able to do this and
Right.
to look things up and go
Yeah.
through here, and there wasn't the same sort of capability.
Yeah.
You look at again at
Yeah.
what that means for children today. With
Absolutely.
ChatGPT.
And again, there's a responsibility there. And
Yeah.
as parents, as people that are managers, we have to make sure we're being responsible. And I really want to emphasize that. But at the same time, those who move first, that first mover advantage, you don't get many opportunities like that.
Yeah.
So in this next year or two, if you can jump on that wave, if you can get yourself out of your comfort zone and embrace this new technology and be able to see how you can leverage it, there's opportunity there. And I think all of us, whether we're junior or senior in our careers, we want to know we always have a shot.
Yeah.
Michael J. Fox always said, if I have a chip and a chair, like basically at a poker table, if I have a chip and a chair, I have an opportunity. And that's all we want. We all want that opportunity to compete, to succeed. Would we all like it handed to us? Sure, but I don't think that's actually appropriate for the human condition.
Yeah.
We want the opportunity to be able to compete and know we took our shot.
Yeah.
And for better or for worse, we can look in the mirror and say, I gave it everything I had.
Yeah. I love what you talked there about the sort of increasing efficiencies, because I think to me this is what all of this tech is. As I think back over the last 2-3 decades, I think there's been an awful lot of focus on just basically everything becoming more expensive.
Yeah.
The cost of running a business is becoming ever increasingly more expensive. The competition in pretty much every industry has become more competitive. I go back to when I first started this business, and the constant conversation was all about the race to zero latency, who could bring down latency in trading, etc., etc. And everyone's looking to say, right, where is our advantage? Where is our advantage? Where is our advantage? And the advantage to me, and how technology interacts with that is, first and foremost, if you have great people, as you're talking about beforehand with your business, you've got a great chance of making it, and no matter what technology you've got around it. But if you can put technology in there that removes friction, that makes it, makes people more productive, that decreases inefficiencies, that increases effectiveness, etc., etc., it suddenly becomes massively exciting about what people can do, and that's where, I think there's only so much people can do to continue to reduce cost, because cost is going to keep on rising. But what you need to look at is how you can increase productivity, and to me that sounds like exactly what you're able to do to make people make better decisions quicker.
Absolutely.
To increase their performance.
And if you can be more productive, we live in a copycat industry.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to follow that trail as well. And so you're going to take the industry forward as well. We're going to evolve, which is, I think, sometimes the hardest thing, is to grab the industry and say, can we just get to the 20th century, let alone the 21st? I joke all the time that, loan settlement is like T+30. How did we get into this mess, right? We need to start thinking about how we can take these opportunities to make the industry better, so there's more money to be made, there's more opportunity for people, there's more of a chance for everyone to have a betterment of themselves and their lives going forward. So I am very much a proponent of that, and I do believe that technology is going to be the driving force towards doing that. And it's not even at an institutional level. There's an application at the retail level. Not everyone wants to maybe work in financial services. Not everyone wants to work in corporate America or the corporate arena. And we should be able to allow them to have those same opportunities too. And so whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a farmer, a teacher, you should have that opportunity, as I've said a few times now. And if the technology can be made available, we can empower you.
This is an interesting thing for me, that I think in certain other areas, the tech has moved a hell of a lot quicker than it has in financial services.
That's right.
So, and I look particularly about the revolution in commerce and retail, and potentially the death of the high street around that. But what it's done is completely revolutionised how we buy, where we buy, and we are used to a digital society where everything's on our phone
100%.
in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
Now, I understand it in financial services because there's a lot more risk involved around that. There has to be more responsibility and more regulation around it, which is why I think it's an interesting thing that's happening within the crypto space at the moment, which had the necessity interruption, owing to the lack of regulation in the space.
Yeah.
So as that continues to go, I think there's an interesting area around digital assets and how that becomes more mainstream as well. That's a different tangent from where we're going. But I do think it's interesting about how, even cloud adoption, I say this all the time on the show, cloud adoption took far longer than it probably should have done within financial services because of a conservative risk aversion.
But I think that's always going to be the case when
Yeah.
the type of dollar amounts that we're talking about in our industry, which
yeah.
are multiple zeros.
Yeah.
We have to almost take a step and ask the questions and be playing the side of the devil's advocate. Because the risk, and we saw 2008. I mean, we were very close to some sort of anarchy. I mean, it was. I don't think employees today who are under the age of 30 understand how bad it almost was. And so we have to make sure that never happens again. We have to make sure our customers' assets are protected, that they are not exposed to risk that they didn't ask for, and that we have an ability to make sure there's no dislocation in the market. And so that's a responsibility. So going back to great power, great responsibility. I think the checks and balances that are in place are doing their job.
Well, this is if we look at the last couple of years since then, and the last couple of big things, GameStop, and then you can look at everything happening at FTX last year, etc. Those are moves that can potentially have the same impact that the subprime market had beforehand. And I think actually there are whilst not perfect, there are definitely lessons learned along that sort of journey, which I think makes it a really interesting situation to be in. So I think we're at a very interesting time for massive innovation in technology and an industry which is, as you rightly say, responsible about how it brings on technology. So looking at that from a sales perspective into those sort of spaces where you've got game-changing tech that can make things so different for the consumer, but selling to an industry there that's probably a little bit reticent about it, and especially at a time there where they're thinking about every single penny and every single decision, and decisions are taking a little bit longer. Talk to us about how you're managing that and how that process works.
Mike Bloomberg said it best. And if I'm not
as often happens.
And if he didn't say this exactly, then I apologize.
You can be pleased about
but
it.
He said, the difference between a good salesperson and a great salesperson is the ability for a customer to be sold a product versus wanting to buy one. And so, as a salesperson, it's really important that you understand your client's pain points. You understand their issues. You may have great technology, but if you're trying to shove it down their throat, you're trying to sell it to them, maybe you get lucky, maybe you put a round peg into a square hole, customer's not completely happy, but they'll use it, but they'll eventually lose it because it's not sticky. Versus, what makes the Bloomberg terminal so great? People buy the Bloomberg terminal. You start a hedge fund, I need to buy a Bloomberg terminal. You move to the sell side, hey, can I get a Bloomberg terminal?
It's inevitable.
It's inevitable. And they've done such a phenomenal job, and all the credit to my former firm. You reach that point where your tech or your product is one people come to you to buy, then you've clearly shown the value to their issues, to their problems, and how you can solve them. And that's what it's always come down to at the end of the day. Sales since the dawn of time is, are you solving a problem that someone else is experiencing? And if so, they'll pay you for it, whether it be barter or whether it be cash or digital currency, whatever it may be. People want to know that there are answers to their problems, and if someone can provide that to them like that, they'll pay for it.
It's interesting you talk about Mike Bloomberg because I often read his stuff. There's some great tweets he puts out, some great information he puts out. He tells a great story about his career. And I think it's always about the anniversary of him, having been made redundant. He puts the same thing out, doesn't he? Which is interesting. But I think when I'm talking to you and I'm listening to some of the things you're talking about, there's an element of, and what I've always respected about him is that element of responsibility for your career and your responsibility for pushing things further forward. We spoke beforehand about the sort of change in marketplace post-COVID and where people work and what people do. And you say, look, you mentioned your kids earlier on. And your decision is to come in there and get out to work and show to them that you're there to take business rather than to see business come to you and wait for things to come to you. It's a make it happen sort of mentality, right? Talk to me about your thoughts around this, because there's a lot of proponents still for hybrid working. There's a lot of people from flexible working from home, remote work, etc. And you can see all sides of every argument. I know where I sit. I think I'm probably a lot very firmly in your camp around where things go. But I'm really interested for you to sort of share your thoughts on that as well.
So first of all, I just want to say very clearly that there is no right or wrong way to run a company from a remote work standpoint. So I just want to make sure that's very clear. Each case is unique. For myself, for my team, the average age on my US team at Sigtech is 27 years old.
Yeah.
I have some employees who are incredibly bright, but junior in terms of their time in the industry, and really want to accelerate their careers. The honest truth is, when you're working remotely, you are basically working towards that Zoom session.
Yeah.
Once that clock starts, that Zoom session is your time, and once it ends, that's when the time with that person ends.
Yeah.
Coming to the office allows you to have that conversation beforehand, that conversation afterwards to debrief with your colleague, your employee. It also allows you to really get to know people individually. What are their motivations? Why are they here? What are they looking for? How can I reward you? How can I make this experience worth your while and have you stay from a retention standpoint? You know, the human condition is something that cannot be done in 2 dimensions. It's done in 3, like we are right now. We could have easily done this over a Zoom. But the conversation we had beforehand, getting to know you, there's so much we have to remember pre-COVID that we did and took for granted. I think if anything, COVID has taught us to appreciate 3-dimension. It has taught us to appreciate that getting to spend time with people is always going to be the great connector in terms of people wanting to work with each other and do business with each other. And so coming to the office, we're at 4 days a week at Sigtech, but we're also an early stage company. You're not going to build a culture by working from home. And so we need to overextend ourselves a little in these early days to establish the company, but we're still flexible. And if you need to work from home for whatever reason, you know, you'll obviously have that flexibility. But as we're working to really do something special here, to be transformative, you really need to be in the weeds with your colleagues.
I remember when I first started doing this show on a regular basis, a weekly basis. It was just during the pandemic. And I remember talking to people and thinking, right, one of their biggest concerns was not having the conferences, the trade shows, the ability to go out there, the ability to network, etc., etc. And there was a lot of thoughts about, right, how do we manage that, how do we do things through. Then all of a sudden people saw that the lack of it, the money dropping from their accounts into it, and said, oh, the trade show's dead, the meeting's dead, the travel to and fro and international travel, etc., is finished. Yeah, we can do this all over Zoom. And now we've seen this sort of evolution back to it, to recognise exactly that. You know, I think that people have recognised the significance, the power, the import of getting there. You know, we had an event in Belfast last week that was fantastically well attended, and it's immediately different to see those relationships in person. I'm going out to New York next month, and there'll be two days worth of meeting people that I just wouldn't be able to get the same sort of access and opportunity all the way through that. And I think it's so important that those sort of things aren't just tossed aside. And whilst technology, you know, this is again the whole concept here, is technology is incredibly important to increase those efficiencies and make people make better decisions or work faster or lose all of the time-consuming nonsense that sort of slows people down. But the human element of it, I think it should all be about enhancing those human elements. So when you're talking about sales, you've got more opportunity to build those human relationships in a better way with more information at the right time.
I completely agree, and I think we have to remember that at the end of the day, technology is a tool, no different than a screwdriver or a hammer. How we use it is in our control. And so, do I spend the time to get to know you, to understand your motivations? Do I go out of my way to say, I'm going to travel to you, wherever you may be located? Do I want to understand your country and your culture? Those things do resonate still. And it's very much like the handwritten card. Email kind of killed the handwritten card, but when you get a handwritten card now, it means so much more. That's, I think, COVID did. You know, we take for granted the Zoom sessions. But when someone does come out of their way to see you, I think we appreciate it a little bit more now.
I absolutely agree with that. I'm glad you said that, because it's something I've believed in for a long time. That you know, I can ask people how many emails they get every single day, and they'll be able to say it. But when was the last time they had something addressed to them land at the office in a physical form? And it's almost non-existent, right? It makes a big difference. I can talk about some great stories about that off camera another time. But I love those. I love that sort of idea of differentiating and doing things differently. I could be talking about this for days, so I'm going to try and wrap things up a little bit on here as well. Talk to me about where the company's at, where the team's at, what's exciting. What we're hurtling into the final quarter of the year 2023. 2024 is upon us. Tell us what you've got planned for 2024 as a business. What's exciting? Who you're speaking to?
Absolutely.
Everything in between.
Very high level. Going into 2024, we're very excited because we've been able to leverage the ChatGPT capability. We have a plugin that will allow for us to effectively allow for our customers to construct portfolios without having to know the knowledge of Python, which is such an important part in the current environment. So to be able to eliminate the need to know how to code, because you're going from low code to no code, or at least code on the back end, that's going to be a huge game changer. And so allowing for firms to now be able to move faster, to be able to take ideas and be able to verbalize them into the ChatGPT functionality. This is something we're starting to see a lot of traction for, and as we move into next year, we really want to have our coming out party, for lack of a better phrase. The company itself is in great shape. We're fully staffed from the standpoint of our executive team. We're hiring more engineers, which is always a good sign. And we'll probably start thinking in the latter half of next year about whether or not we even want to consider a capital raise. I think for any startup, especially if you're early stage, focus on the fundamentals, reduce costs, build the product you say you're going to do, build your pipeline, bring the revenue in. If you focus on those things, you don't necessarily need to go and get an extension from an external source on day one. And so that all of a sudden focuses on the things that matter to you, which is yourself, and that's the only thing you can really control.
I think it's really important you say that, isn't it? Because I think there's a frenzy of people talking about Series A, Series B, Series C, etc., etc. And it's a constant sort of thing. It's difficult. There's certain times where it's great to do that, and certain times where it's not so good to do that. And I think sometimes people sort of raise from the wrong position and not from a position of strength sometimes. So to hear you going through that and looking at it as a business and working on the go, while still being able to sort of release the quality of product that I've just seen before we came on air, that's incredibly exciting, and that shows the sort of business that I think. When you've got investors running to you rather than you running to investors, that's a better position.
Absolutely. I always joke with Ben, as an immigrant's kid, I'm going to be very mindful where I'm spending my money. And so it should be no different with a company where I'm an equity investor or an equity holder, where it's like, hey, we should be questioning every dollar that's spent and where the money's coming from before we ask for outside sources. And so if we all think that way, we're all going to move in the right direction, and that's always healthier for a company as a whole.
Well, I'm really, really excited. I told you I've had a keen interest in Sigtech for a long time and been watching the journey. Even more so now. I knew it was exciting for a reason. It's great to hear even more about it and where you guys are heading. I've got no doubt it's going to be a continued rocket ship of a success story. So thanks for coming and sharing everything on the show today. Before we tail off, tell us who should be reaching out to you. What's the best way of them getting in touch?
Best way is to reach out to myself at krishna.nadella@sigtech.com.
Fantastic. Well, you know to do it. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching, and we will see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Krishna, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Toby.